All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the DMI What's Up Downtown Breakfast here in March. My name is Jason Elstrom. I'm the president of Downtown Madison, Inc., and I just need to make a formal apology to all of you here today. Apparently, I thought I was going to be virtual, so I wear my virtual Zoom business outfit here with my sweatpants and top here. No, I actually locked myself out of my office this morning at 7 o'clock, and weirdly, there was nobody to let me back in. So I apologize. I have a nice suit, I promise. I have a nice press suit on the back of my chair, just but 3 blocks away. So sorry about that. You get me in casual. But anyway, welcome. It is so good to see everyone here and feel the energy to see you all back again. And we have coffee back again, which I think is a huge thing. So let's give a round of applause for coffee. And that's coming from the non-coffee drinker, which surprises most people when you know my level of energy. We have a very important and interesting panel, not panel discussion, but two panelists. Yeah, two panelists today. Judy Davidoff, the editor and president of Isthmus Community Media, and Jason Joyce, the publisher, here to talk about the newest generation of the Isthmus, and a hugely important business and media entity for downtown Madison and for our community. So we're going to talk about the importance of independent media, the journey that the Isthmus has been on over the last couple of years. So we're very excited to hear from our great friends, Jason and Judy. Before we begin today, though, we have a lot of new members. The more members we get, my outfit decreases even worse. So I'll wear shorts next month if we have even more members. We've got a great group here joining us this month. We have CultureCon, who is represented by Nick Lombardino. Economic Growth Advisors, represented by Mike Matthews, a longtime DMI board member. It's great to have him back. Holy Wisdom Monastery, represented by Charles McLymans. Mortensen Construction, represented by Robbie Oldenburg. Representative Collective, the new business from a current board member who, very exciting things happening here in Madison, from Winnie Karanja. TDS Telecom, we're excited to welcome as well, represented by Kit Beyer. And WMSN, Fox 47, represented by John Kramer. Huge thank you to all of our new members. We are only as good as our members, so welcome, welcome, welcome. And I did print this fancy script off for the next section, but don't have it. So now I have to smile at my phone, release it. There we go. We get through it day by day. Next up, we have a very important initiative through our Inclusiveness Committee. And our former chair, Mark Richardson, of the Inclusiveness Committee will be up in just a second. But they have a very important initiative that they are starting now. They're launching a jobs and internship initiative focused on minimizing racial and ethnic disparities while providing employment opportunities for Madison area youth. Within our own civic agenda, the civic engagement agenda, we state we want to encourage the creation and availability of jobs and internships to all youth. And this initiative is making this happen. With the partnership through our great friends at Madison College and Madison Municipal School District, we want to encourage DMI members like you to help directly in this initiative so these youth can gain experience for their educational pursuits and explore their career paths. These experiences really make a difference. My own internship, best internship I ever had in my life, was the first day I realized, oh, I don't want to do this. Did it for the rest of the summer, but it was a terrible internship. But I realized right then I didn't want to go into that field. I will not name that field. No, it's not downtown management, I promise you. So what we're asking for is for you all to really help be partners with us in this work. We're asking you, if you have the ability to bring in paid interns and want to work with us at MMSD and Madison College to find these students, we will be the connector on this project. So any of your companies are interested in this, please send me a note, and we'd love for you to help take part. I want to give Chad is nodding, a huge thanks to Jennifer LeBerge and the team at Findorf, who's run a program like this for decades. And so we've been able to take models from many of our employers that are already doing this work. But if anyone's interested in participating, send me a note and we will connect you. All right. Speaking of the aforementioned Mark Richardson, it's my pleasure to introduce our board co-chair. We think so highly of him that we didn't even print out a name tag for him properly. Yeah, he really is my boss, and we didn't print out a name tag for him. That's Yes, first the outfit and now this. So I'm having a really stellar day. When is my review? Perfect. So Mark is up here today to say a few words about an important advocacy agenda item that we are moving forward right now. Mark, welcome.
I haven't said anything yet. Hold those applause, please. And you want to be my latex salesman? Huh? Any Seinfeld people? So, good morning, DMI members and those at home or wherever you're zooming in from. Never thought I would be the one that's dressed up and you'd be the one that's dressed down. Something is wacky for sure. So, good morning, and I'm glad you guys are here in person. This is weird, right? Trying to get back out and show up, and hey, there's coffee, so we're moving forward. We're moving forward. So, if you can remember, back in February, the DMI board voted as an organization to strongly advocate for the Streetery program and making that permanent. If you think back to the summer of 2020, which is a million years ago in our minds, when that program was installed, think about how that transformed not just downtown, but other parts of the city as well. And quite frankly, the timing on it couldn't have been better, because if not for that program, there's probably some businesses that aren't in business anymore. And you gave me a script, but I'm not going to follow it. So what was cool about that program, and still is the fact that from conception to it being enacted was like record time for Madison, right? And it shows you what can be done when we're aligned, when there's a sense of urgency, and it's sort of there's basic outcomes that we want to see from a piece of legislation. It can happen, and it can even happen here. And people said it couldn't, and it did, and look what it's done. And so this coming Tuesday, I guess the 29th, the City Council is going to take that up to make it permanent. And so we strongly advocate for that to happen. We urge the council to clean up the language, account for seasonality, cross the T's, dot the I's, but let's make this thing permanent and let it continue to change how we experience downtown. So that wasn't exactly how you wanted me to say that, but that's the way I'm doing it. So thank you. Please make sure that the City Council knows that should stick around. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yes, just a couple more words. That is, the Streetery program was amazing for businesses. There are several businesses here today that it really helped directly during the pandemic. And I think it allows us to think more creatively about our use of public space, and in particular downtown. So we are fully supportive of the city's initiative to make the Streetery program permanent. All right, next I'd like to thank our sponsors for today's event. The What's Up Downtown Breakfast is made possible thanks to the generous support of several local companies, including Ho-Chunk Gaming, Madison, Michael Best and Friedrich, State Bank of Cross Plains, and congratulations on the merging of partners with Monona's Bank. And then our newest supporting series sponsor, our good friends at TDS Telecom. So welcome. Thank you, TDS, for stepping up right away. We really appreciate all of the support of our sponsors. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We would not be here without you today. We also want to thank our special series sponsors and contributors, the beautiful Edgewater Hotel. It's good to be back. Amy Supple was here just a little bit ago. And then UW Health, Unity Point Health, Meritor, and Quartz for your ongoing support. Thank you for all you do. Now, let's get to the program. We're excited today to hear from our good friends, Judy Davidoff and Jason Joyce. Judy Davidoff began her career at the Isthmus as a features editor in 1994, returning in 2011 to take over as news editor and then overall editor. In between, she reported and edited at the Cap Times for about a decade. She penned everything from a profile. I love that. This is the best bio ever, by the way. You don't even know that yet. I can read it. You can't, but this will become more clear. Everything from a profile on Mary Kay Cosmetics superstar in our community. Was it me? I've always wanted that pink Cadillac. Yeah, I do want a pink Cadillac. And to an in-depth postmortem on Jim Doyle's tenure as governor. Driven by curiosity and obsessed with accuracy and clarity in writing, she continues to torment reporters with 4 dreaded words. Can you clarify this? probably something that should be said to me over and over and over again when I speak every time. With the help of a longtime Isthmus staffers, recently led the paper's transition to a nonprofit and is now its president as well as its editor. A proud Badger, Judy has a master's degree from the Follett School of Public Affairs. Jason Joyce wrote his first story for the Isthmus as an intern in 1993. He joined the company full-time in 1998, leading their digital media department. That job included converting the essential Isthmus calendar into a database. I mean, that sounds like a 5-year job in on itself. He also wrote a sports column for many years. Jason left in 2013 to become the news editor at the Cap Times, but returned to the Isthmus last summer to become their publisher. While in college at UW, he was the editor of the Badger Herald and at various times lived on the 100 and 600 blocks of State, a downtownite if I've ever seen one. We are pleased to welcome Judy and Jason for the talk this morning. Following the presentation, we will have time for Q&A, and I will come around with a mic if you have questions. For those that are on Zoom, we've got lots of people on Zoom this morning. Send your questions into the chat, and I will ask them from there. All right. Welcome, Jason and Judy.
Yeah, I made it. Good morning, and many thanks for this opportunity to talk with you today about Isthmus Community Media. It's been a while since I've been out of the house by 7 a.m. in a suit, no less, but it does feel great to be able to gather again in person. As has been noted, I'm Judy Davidoff, editor and president of Isthmus, and I'm here today with Jason Joyce, Isthmus publisher. As many of you are well aware, Isthmus has deep roots in downtown Madison. Vince O'Hearn and Fred Milverstadt hatched the idea for the paper when Vince was bartending at the infamous Dangle Lounge, a strip club on East Main Street. And I'll just leave it at that. In its 46-year history, the paper has had 4 downtown offices. First at the old Washington Hotel, then at 14 West Mifflin, and on to 101 King Street. In 2014, when Jeff Haupt and Craig Bartlett bought the paper, they leased the 3rd floor of 100 State Street. Now we have offices not only in downtown Madison, but on the east, near west, and north sides of town. That's right, we're still all working out of our homes. We'd like to start with an introductory video just completed and generously donated by our friend, filmmaker Matt Boatwright-Simon. We'll have a presentation after that, and we want to leave plenty of time for your questions.
Well, it really goes back to what happened during the pandemic, which was in March 2020, when the owners dropped the news about shutting down and laying everyone off by that following Wednesday, 4 or 5 days later.
There was just a shock. I just didn't expect quite so much, quite so fast.
At the very time when a pandemic is hitting your community, all of us were just devastated to share that news with the public that Isthmus was shutting down. What happened next was that Friday, Dylan Brogan and I tried to figure this thing out. I do think it was within a couple of weeks that Jeff, former owner, did find this reader donation program. People did respond with donations. I think it did give us confidence that there would be reader support for our work. The former owners said, we do not see a way forward. Dylan and I said, well, would you support the transition to a nonprofit? Essentially, 4 of us worked 1 year pretty much on a volunteer basis.
Judy asked, who would be on board? And I said yes, because how could I say no? I just tried to concentrate on getting content out.
It was definitely nerve-wracking, so staying home and working on that seemed like a good plan to try to keep it going. If there was any way we were going to keep it going, this was the group of people to do it.
We were able to rise out of the ashes. When we got that first print issue out in August, we were all at the warehouse at 7 o'clock and the papers were on the pallets, and there was definitely a lot of joy.
Isthmus has always been an alternative news weekly. But the other thing that's true is that Madison's sort of an alternative town itself. So we're the mainstream for people who think a little bit alternatively here. I was an intern for Isthmus. Senior year at UW, worked as a news intern for Bill Leaders and worked on a story on legalizing marijuana. Having something in Isthmus was just kind of cool because I felt like I was playing with the grown-ups at that point. Isthmus has a tradition of quality of writing, certainly reporting, but then polishing that story, taking the extra time.
The stories are written in a way that I hope allow people to read with ease. That is very important to me. I think that's about the writing and the editing.
I'm constantly looking for stories to see an empty storefront, what's going in there. Or you're talking to a clerk at a counter, ask a few questions because one question will lead to another. Generally, curiosity is what drives any story.
I do a lot of looking for things. It really is just a lot of work. I don't feel like local music tends to get a lot of attention otherwise, and the calendar is kind of a good way to get that out there. I just think it's important for the community to have a service like this, essentially. With media kind of gradually disappearing over the last decade or so, especially print, I feel like at some point somebody has to stand up and say, we're not going to go away.
Growing up here, it made me love Madison and everything about it, and also like really care about this place. Journalism is absolutely a social good. You're trying to inform the people and let them be able to participate, and people really value that. It doesn't seem like a big deal unless you don't have it at all. And then it's a big deal because bad things happen in the dark.
What we are doing is essential in many ways, and it's essential to many people. And if we inform the community about things that we think are important, the thing that we hear most from people is, well, Isthmus tells us what to do. They tell us what's important that's going on in the arts and culture of the city.
At the end of the day, people need good information from a trusted person whose only objective is to tell them the truth. It's the only way democracy functions. It's the only way that powerful people are held accountable and the voices of people who aren't heard are heard, and positive change is brought to this world.
One of our challenges is explaining to people that Isthmus is new and that we are a nonprofit and that we are supported by readers. It's much more of a direct appeal to people in the community to say, if you think it's important to have journalists looking at the kinds of stories that Isthmus has looked at for 45 years, please donate. Please help us do this work. Please pay our reporters to continue doing their job. Because we're an independent community paper, it works as an advertising product. It brings people into your door. We know who they are. We have a relationship with them, and they respect what we do. And we respect the audience that we bring. Madison is changing and facing new challenges. Isthmus has changed, and we're figuring out those changes with our readers and with our community. I'm still fired up watching that. We've really just been living with the final version of that for the last there's the Hotel Washington. I skipped some of these slides earlier. Sorry about that. This is what 101 King Street looked like when Vince bought it and was building it long before Lucille was there. But and there's Judy's office. We want to really thank Matt Boatwright Simon for donating that video. I want to make that very clear because I don't want anyone to think that we spent like $10,000 of our meager budget on producing this slick video. Matt Boatwright Simon is about to move his part of his business here. He's a filmmaker and video producer. And I think some of you may have already met him at Downtown Rotary, but hope to meet him soon. Matt and I met at Celery Hall about 33 years ago. He lived just down the hall from me in the dorms,
And that's the same place where I picked up Isthmus for the first time. I was familiar with the concept of an alternative weekly, even if I didn't know the term, because we had two in Minneapolis where I grew up, City Pages and the Twin Cities Reader. I had been picking up the free papers at record stores for years and knew them to be the best sources of information about the local music scene. There were news stories about local government and profiles of local figures you couldn't find anywhere else. And it was also where you could read Life in Hell, Matt Groening's weird, irreverent comic strip that predated The Simpsons. Those were my expectations when I reached for Isthmus in 1988, and it did not disappoint. As Judy pointed out, Isthmus was founded in 1976 by Vince O'Hearn and Fred Milverstead as a serious news publication focusing intensely on Madison. In the first issue, which was dated April 9th, 1976, Vince wrote that the newspaper would focus on, quote, anything that people in this city do to amuse themselves and raise a little hell. Early issues featured unconventional topics, sharp commentary, ambitious arts and entertainment coverage, and a comprehensive calendar of events, which Vince also referred to as the backbone of the business, and it remains true today. Isthmus's owners have all been committed to being downtown, to be close to the capital and local government, but also arts venues, nightclubs, and restaurants that continue to influence the city's culture and, in turn, our journalism. We celebrate the center of Madison in our name, Isthmus. And the truth is that before Isthmus came along, there were no other businesses in town using the word Isthmus in their title. I did a little fact checking on this last week. I went downtown and looked up an old phone book. So this is the phone book from 1977. Isthmus stands alone. If any of you work for companies named Isthmus, just, you know, pay some respect. Flipping through old copies of Isthmus, as we've been doing in the last few weeks to prepare this video and this presentation. First of all, it's been a blast. It's really fun to see old ads like this one for the Fess Hotel. $12 wine tasting, 12 wines available. It was clear that early predictions that a free newspaper could be sustained by advertising came true. But it's also important to note that even when a for-profit business relying solely on advertising revenue, Isthmus was always supported by its readers. Traditional retail advertisers, restaurants, nightclubs, retailers, but also car dealerships and banks always did business with Isthmus. But so did Madison residents looking to sell their bikes, sublet their apartments, and hire staff via the classifieds. And so did readers looking to meet someone who enjoyed the same parts of Madison they did. Anyone here? We're in a safe space. Did anyone here ever place an Isthmus Personals ad, respond to an Isthmus Personals ad? Anyone married to someone who they met through the Isthmus Personals? Okay, you can tell us about it later. What is definitely true is that alternative weekly newspaper publishers made a lot of money on personals ads in the 1980s and 90s. And if you think about it, a lot of great journalism was funded by people trying to sell their futon or get a date. Fast forward to the mid-1990s when the internet came along. Of course, we think of the big disruptors. Media consumption patterns changed. Social media metrics allowed businesses to believe they were better reaching their customers. And companies like Yelp and TripAdvisor superseded experienced restaurant critics on Google searches. More critically, for weeklies like Isthmus, Craigslist consumed classified advertising, and any number of companies took over the personals and dating space. In order to replace that lost revenue, Isthmus turned to live events. Ask the owner of a restaurant that's received a positive review or a band that got a critic's pick. We've always been able to draw a crowd. So at first we put on events that brought in revenue from advertisers and sponsors, but then we moved into ticketed events and really were leaders among newspapers, companies who generated revenue through ticket sales. Readers were once again supporting our journalism, but they were doing it by buying tickets to Beer and Cheese Festival, which we started in 2010, or entering Paddle and Portage, which we purchased and took over in 2012. Just a side note, Isthmus no longer owns or operates those events. It was not the heyday of the 80s or 90s, But that general business model worked very well for alt weeklies around the country who started hiring event staff instead of inside salespeople. The only thing that could derail it would be something as improbable as a global pandemic that shut down large public gatherings for like 2 years. But what were the chances of that ever happening? So it was against that backdrop that Isthmus's second owners, Jeff Hupt and Craig Bartlett, hit pause on publishing the paper right around this time 2 years ago. An abrupt ending for sure, but also an opportunity to think about a different kind of community newspaper, to reboot Isthmus as a nonprofit organization. I'll turn it over to Judy.
So just about 2 years ago, when we announced we were pausing print in March 2020, readers certainly reacted with dismay, commenting on the post that we put on the website that we were going dark. And many asked, where could they send money to help us out? We didn't have any way at the time to collect contributions, but within weeks, the paper launched a reader donation program. That support from readers and continued support from advertisers gave us the confidence to forge a path forward. In the summer of 2020, Jeff and Craig put their support behind a plan to transition the paper to a 501c3 nonprofit and generously offered to donate Isthmus's intellectual property and the proceeds of the reader donation program. We are now a considerably smaller operation than we once were. 5 full-time staffers, including an editor, associate editor, senior reporter, calendar editor, and publisher. We all wear many hats these days, including, as you saw in the video, distribution driver. In my house, we refer to it as my paper route. Independent contractors handle sponsorships and design duties. But what does it mean that we are now a nonprofit? On the finance side, it means that we can now receive tax-deductible donations from readers and businesses. It means we can seek major gifts from philanthropists and pursue grant funding from local and national foundations. It also means that we are accountable to the public in the same way other types of nonprofit organizations are, and we are mission-driven. Our mission is to inform and engage the Madison community through independent, in-depth journalism. We believe in the power of storytelling to expose wrongdoing and injustice, provide solutions, and uplift communities. In some ways, our mission and approach is not very different from what it was when we were privately owned. Unlike most publications where the content is staff written, we also use contributions from freelancers. So we are incorporating voices from the community in our pages. In this way, we provide a platform for beginning as well as veteran writers. We also help train the next generation of journalists through internships. When the news hit that we were going dark, more than a few writers reached out to say that they had found their voice at Isthmus. But there are some differences in our current approach and strategies. We are more focused on collaboration than on competition. That means looking for partnerships so that those of us in the media world can make the most of limited resources and give our respective audiences the richest experience possible. In our case, that has meant partnering with the Madison-based Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalism, which has been doing important investigative work for more than 10 years and is also a nonprofit. We also have a partnership with the Wisconsin Humanities Love Wisconsin Project, whose mission is to, quote, use storytelling and social media to bring about a more connected, compassionate, and engaged Wisconsin. Each month, we publish one of their stories in our print edition. We will also soon be partnering with a local podcast that is focused on local storytelling. Through these partnerships, we are able to provide diverse stories from around the state that we would likely not get to otherwise. We have also reconceived our covers. Traditionally, the cover art illustrated the cover story, but now we are seeking out illustrations that capture the zeitgeist of the moment and showcase the work of local artists. Art director Tommy Washbush set the bar high with our relaunch cover when he played off the notoriously incorrect 1948 newspaper headline, prematurely announcing Harry Truman's defeat. And people are still talking about the iconic scene of the Tenny Park Lagoon by illustrator Madeline Voigt that was on the cover of our February issue. It's rewarding to watch the social media feeds of the artists when they post their cover images on publication day. We see this new approach as an important way to bring attention to the work of talented local illustrators and artists. Now to the question of the title and the presentation. Why does the reboot of Isthmus matter? On a larger scale, why does local news matter? We have already witnessed the loss of many news outlets and reporters across the country. According to a 2020 report by the UNC Hussman School of Journalism and Media, over the last 15 years, more than 1/4 of the country's newspapers closed, and half of all local journalists lost their jobs. Madison has not been immune. The Capital Times and Wisconsin State Journal have lost scores of journalists since 2008. Isthmus was also forced to cut staff due to revenue constraints. The pandemic only accelerated the trend of closures and reporter layoffs. What this means for readers and communities is that there are fewer reporters attending city council meetings, county board meetings, neighborhood meetings, where such things as transit route changes and proposed developments are on the agenda. Local news outlets are the ones that keep readers informed about the issues that affect people's lives and pocketbooks. When outlets disappear and newsrooms get cut, there are fewer reporters to follow up on tips, cover protests and social movements, do enterprise reporting, and keep voters apprised of upcoming elections and changes to voting rules. There is also less time and opportunity to capture the offbeat and quirky stories that not only entertain, but give a different window into the city we think we all know. Features on high-profile individuals, as well as those who toil behind the scenes, highlight important work being done locally and keep people connected to their community. But sometimes these kinds of features take a backseat to news stories when resources are scarce. There is also some evidence that political divisions intensify when local news goes away. A 2018 report found that voters become more polarized in communities that lost a local paper. Democracy truly suffers in the absence of journalism. But why print? Why not just publish online? While the internet, with its search engines and algorithms, is very good at giving you more of what you already like, nothing is quite as good as a general interest newspaper at helping you find something new to be interested in, feed your curiosity, and discover your next passion, even if it's just a new beer or restaurant to try. That's what we're all about at Isthmus and have been for decades. You open the paper for an in-depth story about the Dane County Jail, and you stumble across a profile of a local hip-hop artist you've never heard of, or a film fest offering that prompts you to buy tickets. Punk rockers learn about politics, and politicians learn about punk rock. That's part of why the reboot of Isthmus matters too.
Like many of you, we worked hard to survive COVID and are now focused on rebuilding and returning to being, as one of our donors called us, a pillar of Madison culture. Among our 5 full-time staffers, we've lived in Madison a combined 175 years and spent a combined 79 years working at Isthmus. Our paper in this city mean a lot to us, and we are driven to continue covering the news, arts, people, and businesses that make it what it is. And I hope you will join us in that endeavor. And here's how you can. Pick up the paper and share it. We're available all over town. We go heavy in grocery stores, but also libraries, liquor stores, restaurants, bars. There's plenty of boxes around the square. So when you go on a walk for lunch, find a box and pick us up and share it with a friend, bring some back to the office. You can support our work financially by becoming a member at isthmus.com/donate. We have a number of giving clubs that you can join there. Members will get an email newsletter from me here in about a week. So you have that to look forward to. You can buy a t-shirt. We have some original designs by Tommy Washbush available at isthmus.com/store. Advertiser sponsor. I'm always glad to talk about advertising and sponsorships with local businesses. It's been one of my great joys in the last 6 months to go around talking to people. I'd love to set up a time to talk with you. We can put together a Zoom. I can and talk to you in person, whatever you'd like. You can contact me at jjoyce@isthmus.com, or we can talk here later today. We are also building out our board of directors and looking for people with an interest in local media and skills in the areas of marketing, advertising, fundraising, business development, human resources, insurance, and diversity. We're also looking for an attorney who would be interested in serving on the board or providing pro bono legal counsel. And of course, we're also always looking for story tips and people interested in contributing content. You can get in touch with Judy about that at jdavidoff@isthmus.com. Thank you all very much for showing up this morning and listening to our story. And Judy and I are happy to take any questions you have.
Wow, we're gonna have time for questions here. Yes, we are on. We do have time for questions here. If you have questions on Zoom, please send them through the chat. If you have questions here, raise your hand. We'll be right over Susan for your question. But I just want to say it's an honor to be on the same White Pages book as me. So I'm so very thankful for the Isthmus and Ilstrip, like the two eyes in the entire city, to be on the same page. And I just want to say personally how important the Isthmus is for our community, and particularly for the Isthmus. You have not always written flattering stories about us, but that's great. That is the importance of it. You've also done so much for downtown. Downtown would not be what it is today without the Isthmus. So we are eternally grateful from all of us at DMI and all of us that work on downtown for all that you have done. So a personal thanks to Judy, to Jason, to Dylan. He and I have had many conversations walking around downtown. We can't thank you enough, and we need to do everything we can as a community to support independent journalism like the Isthmus. So for me personally, thank you very much. And again, it is an honor to share my White Pages. Do they even have White Pages anymore? Is that a thing? Probably not. All right, so if you have a question, please raise your hand, and I'll bring the mic around. Hopefully it won't give you that feedback again. We're right there.
You might not have your pick of where you're going to live or go, or online versus print, but there are jobs like that, and there are also jobs that are more in the trade areas, specialized. It definitely seems like people are still interested in the field and going into it. Yeah.
The question, just for all those on Zoom, is about how media organizations are moving forward, and is nonprofit a model that works for others?
Yeah, nonprofit. Even before I left Isthmus in 2013, we had discussed the options of going nonprofit. I hesitate to call it a trend because at this point it's more than 10 years old. What you're seeing in a lot of, especially larger metropolitan cities, is entrepreneurs starting up nonprofit journalism shops. And this is part of where the growth in the industry in terms of where recent graduates are going. You might have like a 3-person shop in a city like Pittsburgh that writes about only development, or people writing about mental health, or neighborhoods. And those tend to be nonprofits. And in many ways, they're maybe supported by like a single grant that pays, pays the employees their salary. Somebody's donating office space, and that's about all they need. So that's definitely happening. You're also seeing employee-owned outfits. There's a story on the Columbia Journalism Review that I just read yesterday about Defector Media, which is sort of where the former staff from a website called Deadspin that many people might remember, sort of an irreverent sports website that grew out of the Gawker tree. They've reformed as sort of a co-op. It's employee-owned. So there's a lot of entrepreneurial activity going on in this space, nonprofit, employee-owned, even co-ops. So many different ways. In some ways, it's really inspiring to see that in news deserts, especially, where news goes away. There's always somebody who's really interested in getting back in there and making sure that something happens. Journalists who are like, well, look, I can pull something together, and they are, and the funding models are sort of changing to meet that need.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on that. And as Jason noticed, I think one of the differences for us is that, we had this large established operation, and people expected, a certain approach and certain services provided, and we're still trying to be that broad. It's part of the challenge, right? As opposed to one person, in the morning doing a curated newsletter, or deciding they're just going to, 2 people covering their local city council online only, a much more kind of focused and in some ways, easier operation to manage with a small staff.
Thank you both. Maybe the Paul team for putting this back together. I don't know about you guys, but I could I'm taking it on, right? I think it's perfect. The disruption that has happened. A lot of bad, some good. What's the best part of it? What's the best part of it?
Mark asked, what's the best part of the disruption in the industry over the last few years?
The funny thing about disruption is that Isthmus was a disruptor, right? We came into the market. You ask people who have been working at the dailies for a long time, they didn't really care for us. When I went to work out at Fish Hatchery, there were a lot of people out there that didn't have very nice things to say about Isthmus. And I always wondered what we did other than, to try to fill a hole that they weren't filling. So disruption isn't always a bad thing, I would go back to, what we talked about in the presentation and what we talked about on the video a little bit, where Isthmus has always been to some degree reader supported. People were either buying classified ads and personals ads. They were buying tickets to our events. And now what we're doing is we're just asking them straight up, please support our journalism. And, it's something that public radio and public television have been doing for many years. They go directly to their viewers and say, if you like what we do and if you think we're a valuable service, please help support our work. And it's been just, beyond gratifying, inspirational really, that since the reader donation program started, and we had another push at the end of the year with a matching campaign, overwhelming support, so many people joining us and paying, $10 a month to support our journalism. And the only, we're not sending them a tote bag. We're not inviting them to a gala. We're just saying, the payoff is that our reporters get to do their job, and somebody's watchdogging local government. Somebody's writing stories about people in the community doing interesting things. Somebody's paying attention to our small businesses as they try to come out of the pandemic. So that's just cool.
Yeah. I think on an editorial side, it obviously forces you to remember why you're doing this. When we were doing the weekly, you're on this hamster wheel.
what's going to be in the news section, what's going to be in features, what's going to be in arts, and you're kind of focused on the getting the stories and the process of getting the paper out. This obviously forced a real reckoning. Why do we do this? Why is it important? What kind of work do you want? Do you see yourself doing in the future? There isn't an owner telling us what to do. I think it allows for different creativity. We went in the different direction with the cover. I don't think we ever would have had the kind of collaborations we had before. Really, the mindset much more before was, well, if it's here, it's not going to be, in our paper as well. And, we're much more flexible with that, realizing people don't see things where you think they do all the time.
All right, we have a question from Zoom about watchdogging sort of local government, a conversation that we had right before. Speaking of disruption, local government has been disrupted, right? Meeting on Zoom, meetings lasting until 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning. Why is it so important that local journalism is following what's happening on a local level with so many important local issues that are happening?
Well, I think as Dylan said in the video, bad things happen in the dark. And, that's just a basic piece of journalism, that you follow where policy is being made. And even more important, that you know about things happening beforehand and you follow the steps. A few of us were talking about, the Zoom meetings themselves and what people on the council might miss from not being, in the same room and being able to swivel the chair around and ask a question or talk about strategy. And also, when I was a local government reporter for the Cap Times, my MO every morning was just to make a stop at the city county building. And I would just walk through the halls and stop in the mayor's office and the comptroller's office. And I got a lot of good stories that way. So it's just being there, knowing people, developing sources. It's just a very basic piece of journalism, and it's a very basic piece of democracy, because if people aren't paying attention and reporting on these stories, people really aren't going to know about it. Yes, there's social media, and people will, go on Facebook and tell you what they think or tweet something out, but it's not fact-checked necessarily, and it really isn't journalism.
The only thing I would add to that is, Judy and I both spent time working at the Cap Times, which is a different type of journalism than what we do at Isthmus to some degree. But, when you supervise reporters that cover state government and city government, you realize really all of the work that goes into doing that job before the meeting is ever gavelled to order. Someone's looking at those agendas and doing research on the topics that are showing up there, making phone calls, asking a lot of questions. And I think if you're a public official and you realize that someone's going to literally call your phone and ask you questions about what you're proposing, you think about it a little differently. Hopefully you think about it a little bit more thoroughly. You prepare yourself to answer questions, and maybe you sort through some of those things in your head. We're really lucky in Madison. Our government here is pretty transparent when you compare it to other places. Go to a town board meeting sometime and see how those folks might respond, to a direct question. It's not the same. So that's what we're trying to avoid here in Madison, obviously. We have learned through studies that when local news reporting goes away, it isn't just that, local government sort of falls down on the job. It actually becomes corrupt. People who want to take advantage of local government will then do so because no one's watching them. And that's what happens.
One more question, Alan. Question was, where do you see professional journalism standards heading? Judy and Jason.
Well, I think for those of us who practice journalism, they are pretty much the same. You know, you do want more than one source. You, of course, would like that source to be on the record with, you know, some accommodations for sensitive topics and other, you know, other things where you would consider maybe just using a first name or anonymous. But it's really, you know, the basics are still all the same. You need to find what the story is within the topic. You can't just go out and write a story about housing. You need to figure out what it is you're going to write within that large topic. You need to find your sources. You need to fact check. You need to write it in a way that's readable and people will go from beginning to end. And, you know, I do think that one thing that is obviously changed in the last few years, but really was always true for Isthmus, and I think Isthmus was maybe one of the first kind of papers in alts in general, is that we were not he said, she said journalism. So if someone said something utterly false, we didn't just find someone else to try and counter that in a way that really didn't clarify things for readers. We would, in some way, try to present what the truth of it was. And of course, now you see, really since Trump came on the scene, mainstream papers, you know, day in and day out, really calling out what is false in someone's narrative. So if anything, that's kind of one of the biggest changes, I think, to journalism today.
Yeah, I would just add that journalism outlets, we're talking about cable news here, in some cases daily papers, and in some cases online only outlets, whose primary goal is to break the story, to get it on social media first, to be the people who are first, to be fast as opposed to right or accurate all the time. And, you know, when you talk to people at Isthmus, we're often incredulous about these trends because we've never subscribed to that perspective on journalism. It's never been important for us to be first. We take extra time. You know, Judy is an excellent editor. Writers love to write for her because of what a close and careful editor she is and how she challenges writers to be better. That takes time and experience, know-how that, you know, you just don't find everywhere else. And that's what has drawn many of us to Isthmus in the first place, has drawn many of us back to Isthmus because we've lived the other life and said, like, nah, I sort of like it when we craft things a little bit more carefully. So that's not to say that it's not important to be fast, you know, and first. It's just not what we do. So, you know, if you like what we do, you know, Judy's a perfect example of why we think that's a good way to go.
Well, I think we are very fortunate in Madison to have so many great journalism outlets, the television stations, Cap Time, State Journal, and the Isthmus. And we need to be supporting all of them so they continue to do the important work for our community. So let's give another round of applause to Judy and Jason for all of their work. We also want to say a huge thank you again to our program sponsors today, Ho Chunk Gaming, Madison, Michael Best and Friedrich, the State Bank of Cross Plains, our newest sponsor, TDS Telecom, welcome, the Edgewater Hotel, Unity Point Health Meritor, UW Health, and Courts. Thank you all very much. We will be back in April with a New Faces, New Places, which will be announced very soon, and another What's Up Downtown breakfast in 4 weeks' time. We'll see you all soon. Thank you for your continued support of downtown and support the Isthmus.